Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Building Flexible Websites with Drupal 8. My name is Chris Jorgenson. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Unleash Technologies. For those of you who do not know us already, Unleash Technologies has been dedicated to creating award-winning websites and digital experiences for our clients since 2007. We have a particular focus on open source web technologies, with our primary platforms being Drupal and WordPress. Our team has overseen over 50 Drupal 8 initiatives since 2017, so we decided to put together today's webinar as an overview on how it has made building sites easier than ever before. At this time, I'll be turning things over to Jenna Shenk, our front-end developer superstar here at Unleash Technologies.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenna. As you said, I'm a front-end developer here at Unleash Technologies. I've worked here for about 3 years, and in that time, I've probably built between 10 and 15 of those Drupal 8 sites that we've launched, and I continually maintain a number of Drupal and WordPress sites as my day-to-day job. My job essentially is to ensure that a website looks good, it performs well, and it's easier for content managers to use. My mission really is to create the holistic experience for front-end users and as well as my clients. To give an overview of what we'll be talking about today, we are going to be talking about Layout Builder and Gutenberg Editor, which are two kind of new tools to Drupal 8, and discuss how you can use them in your site. But we'll be starting with traditional site building to kind of frame our conversation. So we're going to talk about what is site building, what we like about it, what are limitations, and what your role as a content editor is versus maybe a role as myself as a developer. So to start with traditional site building, everything I talk today is going to be a reflection of Unleash's approach to web development and site management. Your particular process may look a little bit different, but I'm willing to bet there's a lot of similarities to things that I'm talking about today. So before we can jump into some of these tools I'm going to show you, again, I'm going to frame our conversation with maybe what our current process will look like for you as a content manager and why you might be wishing that you could have something different in your process. So we'll begin with framing our thinking. What is site building? So site building is a term that we use heavily here at Unleash as the space between design and a usable product. So you'll see in this image, we will have a crafted design, built by our designers, our solution architects, and approved by you, the client. After you've come to this point and you've agreed on what the layout is, what the features are, and things like that, you'll hand it to a dev team that will go into a stage called site building, where we will be adding fields, maybe we'll create content types or adding blocks that you can then use to populate with content and use throughout your site. This particular stage in site building is performed by a developer, not by a content manager. While you do have influence on what it's going to look like, we are doing the actual building and the layouts and the styling of how everything looks. Essentially what we're doing is we're building that framework for you as the content manager so that when everything is complete, we pass it to you that you can use throughout your site at your discretion, depending on what your goals are with the website at that time. So what exactly goes into this process? I touched on it a little bit, but a developer creates a layout made up of fields, blocks, and views. If these are terms you're not familiar with, they're pretty specific to Drupal. So we'll have fields are reattached to your content type or your page that you're working on. Blocks are reusable pieces that you can use throughout your site. And views are typically dynamic content, so a related content view or a news feed, things like that that are changing throughout the site as you add content and remove content. Once we've created these tools, we then use templates to define in a code base the styles and the structure of the layout. Are things going to appear in one column? What kind of colorings and fonts are we using? Things like that. And the fields populate the design, which is important to note here. So you as a content manager are using those fields to fill out the design that we're giving you. So what is my role? And that's the question for yourself is, what is my role as the content manager? The content manager is going to be using the fields and using those content types to craft and to strategize use of pages. The developer is creating the fields and essentially creating those tools. The distinction that I'm making here is you are just populating content, but you're not styling pages and things like that. So why is your experience important? As a developer, it is very easy for me to just want to build lots of cool, beautiful things and maybe not focus too much on what is a content manager's experience when they're populating content. The issue that arises here is I can build the most beautiful, robust website, but if you, the content manager, don't know how to use it, you can't create those elements because it's confusing or you don't understand where the different pieces fit together, then we have not done our job well. So what you should remember as a content manager is that your experience is important because you are creating the content at the end of the day. You're the one that's driving those business goals to your users, and we are giving you the tools to do that. As a quick example here, content managers often are not wanting to use HTML and CSS to build things that they want. So if you're trying to build an accordion, it is difficult to go grab that code and to write it out. Maybe it's not something that you're comfortable with, and you shouldn't be. That's totally fine. What your experience should be is simply putting in information and directing the content that way. You shouldn't have to have a technical experience to be the content manager. So let's recap this traditional site building process. Pages contain fields, and the fields are laid out in a template, and your input is to translate those fields, and it goes into the design. And once you've put all of those elements together, you'll achieve that one responsive design. So for example, if I'm creating a case study page, I'm going to put a title, a date, an author, an image field. I'm not concerned with how the layout is looking. I'm just adding those pieces and essentially trusting that your site is going to distribute them into the places and build that beautiful front-end design that you've agreed upon with your designer. Now, there's nothing wrong with this process, and it's great, especially if you're trying to generate content quickly. You're not really interested in building that robust, different kinds of layouts. This is a great, safe way to build your site out. And we're big fans of it when we do it often with our clients. So again, why we like this. Number one reason why I like this is branding. You're going to have consistent colors and a feel that aligns with your brand. So what I mean by that is if you've been a content manager for a long time, maybe you've had an older website where you didn't have those branding elements and you found yourself setting, inline styles in your WYSIWYG and your fonts never looked the same and content was not cohesive with your brand. Traditional site building gives you those elements. It gives you fonts and headers and image styles without any work on your part. We also like it because there's consistency. So I expect when I put information into a field, it's going to appear in a polished format with no effort on my part. I don't have to make decisions. I don't have to tweak content to appear in a certain way. That's already been done for me. This includes image sizing or content control. So teasers are trimmed. There's going to be no unexpected look. Links are not getting pulled into places that they shouldn't be. It reduces the amount of worry that you have to have when you're creating pages, and it should make a very streamlined experience. So between branding and consistency, site building is a very essential part to your brand. Limitations. So a lot of the things I just talked about can lead to limitations in traditional site building. You are restricted to those fields. So for example, if you have a basic page or a landing page, you may only have a field for a banner, a header, and a body text. But for example, if you're trying to create a gallery for a unique event that you had, you don't have that ability at your fingertips. That would be something that you would have to go and talk to a development team about, asking if you could implement that in your site. This kind of relates to, it can't really handle unique content. So when you're creating different content types with your development team, you're planning for what's going to be in there. But if you have a basic page or a landing page where you're not really sure what kind of content you're going to be wanting to display there, it can be hard to predict the elements that you're going to be using. So in that, you can be limited to a design, one single design. Furthermore, you need to adjust layouts with a development team. That's not something that you can do on your end. So if you're working with a template and you've decided, I don't really like this one column layout, I really wish I could have 2 columns, maybe just for this one particular page. It works for all of my other content to have it like that. You don't actually have the ability to control that. All of that is handled in the template side of it, and you're not able to adjust it on your end without the help of a development team. So that kind of wraps up our traditional site building section. After discussing the limitations and the pros, these are some questions that I would say ask yourself as we continue in this webinar here. What kind of content do I most frequently create and edit? So this is really helpful in determining what tool will be best for you. Are you creating blog posts most frequently? Are you creating landing pages, or do you not actually touch your content that often? Are you just editing different content? And that leads to the next question. How often do I create and edit content? Is this something you're doing weekly, monthly? Do you actually not touch your website very often until maybe a new event arises and you have to create that event? Next is, what do I find most limiting during my content creation? So when you're creating content, you probably have a reoccurring frustration of, I wish I could put an image right here in the middle of my content, or I wish that this text could be in a grid layout versus straight down the line. And then finally, do I like creating custom layouts? Am I good at it? This is kind of a tough question that you have to ask yourself, but some content editors are just not interested in creating and designing their own landing pages. They would rather use their development team for that, and that's absolutely okay. That is what your development team is for. But if you have those graphic designers on your team, or you are more creatively inclined, and you find yourself wanting to try out different layouts on your site without having to work with a developer constantly, some of these tools are going to be perfect for that. So with those questions in mind, we're going to move into the Layout Builder and the Gutenberg Editor. These two are what we call modules in Drupal, and if you're not familiar with that term, it's essentially an addition to your site that kind of gives you a new tool set. So if you have a Drupal site, you probably have dozens and dozens of modules that build out certain features. So modules for search, modules for creating some of those news feeds or things like that. So this is just an additional module that you install and enable on your site. And both of these elements are actually very quick to configure. There's not a lot of ramp-up time for your development team to give you these tools. So the problems that they seek to solve. With both of these modules, they seek to empower the content manager. In the first half of the presentation, we talked about the division of who does what in the site building tasks. At what point is content handed off to a content manager to populate and things like that. These new editor tools seek to kind of blur the lines of what each role is doing, giving the content manager more power to create those layouts and to create some of that site building tasks, and allowing the developer to kind of hand that imagination off to them. It also allows them to build unique landing pages on the fly. I use landing pages here, but it could be any content that maybe is coming to mind in this presentation. You no longer need to choose one layout and one design for a particular page. You can instead have your design team style components to match your brand, and then you can take those and arrange them in whatever way you see fit. In that note, it marries the branding and flexibility. So you can still have that same polished look that you like with very heavily designed and laid out pages, but it gives you the flexibility for you to determine what content goes where and to rearrange things on the fly. And finally, a more robust tool than just WYSIWYGs. If you're familiar with some of those editors where you get your list elements and you can click the source and edit the HTML a little bit, it gives you some tools, but it's not great. It gives you basically the ability to add text and float images. It's not anything very robust. With these new tools, it expands that tool set and basically allows you to add galleries, hero banners, columns, text blocks, a lot of different variety that you can have you wouldn't have with just that standard WYSIWYG. So we're going to compare the two editors now. Let's start with Layout Builder. Layout Builder is a solely Drupal product and is kind of new on the scene in the last few months. So you maybe have not heard of it before now because it's just been introduced into the Drupal core. What Layout Builder uses is it creates layouts using fields and Drupal blocks. So what I mean by that is the emphasis is on layouts. It seeks to kind of add on to your current content management experience where you're going into a node, you're adding your fields, so you're adding your title, your image, your body text, just as you normally would. But after you hit save, you have the option to rearrange a layout, just like you're showing in this image here, where I can add sections, I can drag and drop different fields that I've already populated into different areas. So if I'm creating a case study, I can move the image to the side, I can add the author name at the top, whatever layout would make sense for that particular element, and it only applies to that particular page. It's not going to change the look of any other pages. Again, the content is populated using traditional Drupal fields. So it's just adding on to your current process right now and gives you the flexibility to change a layout. The Gutenberg Editor, on the other hand, is creating pages using the Drupal blocks and generic page elements. And the distinction that I'm trying to make here is that with the Gutenberg Editor, you would not really use Drupal fields. So your editing experience is going to be completely different from what you're using right now. We find this very, very helpful for landing pages where you don't really have a lot of must-need fields such as authors and dates and testimonials or things like that. You would rather create a landing page for whatever the content is that you're making right here. Using these generic page elements, you can create the page as you go. So in the editor side, you will be adding the banners, you're adding the text, adding the galleries, and when you hit save, then you'll see your whole layout. You're adjusting the layout from there. There's not that two-step process that the Layout Builder will give you. So which tool is right for me? Both of them sound similar, but they do have very distinct use cases in my opinion. When to use. So in my opinion, Layout Builder is great for sites that have that are very field intensive. So what I mean by that is if you have a product content type and, for example, you're selling books and you have a lot of very specific fields that you can't really just get rid of. It's not a generic thing that you want to make each time. But say there is a particular book that you just want to rearrange the content on because it's a bestseller and you want to make sure that you're showing that product in the best way it can be. The Layout Builder is good because you can drag and drop and you can add additional elements. So any block that you're using throughout the site, you could drop on that page as well. Why I like that little aspect is if you are familiar with Drupal, the block manager can be quite confusing and a little bit intimidating, even for me, because you have to place a block and choose a region and choose a page, and there's just so many elements to account for, and it can be easy to mess up. This kind of gives a more visual way to add blocks to different pages. That is much easier for a content manager who's not working with this every single day and doesn't have that fresh in their mind how to do it. Another great use is synced content. So a lot of our clients are syncing from Salesforce or Netform or places like that. And so you need those one-to-one mappings with the fields. It's essential to how your website runs, but you do want to have the ability to add layouts. That's where I see a great use case because the fields are already there and you're simply rearranging them on the page. So continuing with Layout Builder, I am going to walk through a short recorded demo and try to kind of play and pause as I go along. Okay, so I'm going to pause here for a minute. If you're not familiar, this is the Drupal Backend Editor. If you are familiar, this is going to look pretty similar to what you use right now, where you have your title, you have your various fields, you have your same sidebar settings. Everything looks pretty much the same. And you're going to populate it exactly as you normally would with any content. I added a few different fields here to kind of show you how different things would work, but you can have any kind of field you would with your normal Drupal content right now. So after I've added all my fields, I'm going to save it and make sure that it's published. And I kind of get this very generic layout. So for the sake of this demo, this is an unstyled install of Drupal. So what you're looking at right now is very plain. If this was your site, you would probably see what your default layout would look like. You don't have to determine a layout at any point. As I'm going down, maybe I decide that I don't like how the default layout looks for this. So I'm going to choose the Layout tab right there. And it takes me to this drag and drop page. You can turn off the Show Content Preview, and you can just look at it as based on fields if the content preview is kind of confusing you, but I like it with the preview, so I'll leave it on for now. Also make sure to note that you're editing a single case item. This is not going to apply to every single item. If you want to change the template, you have the ability to do so at a different part. We won't be going over that in a demo, but it's the same process. Essentially what these different regions are showing are you can add a section and then add blocks within a section. So this allows you to add contained or full width regions based on kind of how your theme is already laid out. Right now I have a container around the entire region, but that doesn't have to be the case for your site. In what I did just previously to this was add a 2-column region that I'm now able to drop blocks in whenever I want. I can edit any of the current elements. So if I go and configure the elements, I can change the way that the label is displayed. I can change the way that the image looks. So maybe the image is way too large right now, and I want to apply a different image style. I'll make this image nice and small so that I can drag it into my 2-column layout right here. And then I want that body content to appear next to the image because I just think that looks nice. And then I'm okay with how maybe the rest of that looks. I can add additional blocks here if there are any other Drupal-specific elements that I want to appear, or even repeat any of the elements on the page, if for whatever reason you want to display the author twice in 2 different locations. Here I'm just adding the location block to appear under the body text, and I can move any of the elements up and down within each region. And then I just hit Save Layout, and my layout's going to appear just like that. Now, the nice thing is, if I go back, I'm still seeing that same content editing experience on this side, so it's not changing the way that this is laid out at all. The pros and cons of the layout builder. Essentially, what I really like is you can move otherwise static fields wherever you want, and you can add blocks, views, and widgets in whatever section you want. So it's kind of using those 2 great components of Drupal, and it's marrying it into a very visual layout that you can have. The cons are there's no out-of-the-box elements, and I'll get into that a little bit more with the Gutenberg Editor, but you're not going to get any of those nice gallery tools or any additional fields than what you already have at this moment. The main goal is to be able to lay out your current fields. Another great feature is the layout library. So you can create reusable layouts for blocks or content. This means that if I had a case study, I could create 2 alternate layouts that a content editor could switch between pretty easily, just choosing a drop-down right at the bottom of their page. It quickly applies a layout with any additional effort on the content editor's side, and it kind of gives you a freedom to add that alternate style, but you don't have to actually think through what that layout's going to be every single time. Next is the Gutenberg Editor. So this is our second module that you can use on your site, and is a very similar visual editor tool. When to use this? Sites that are content-driven. That might be a confusing term, but what I mean by that is sites that what maybe we would refer to as brochure sites, where you're going there, you're digesting information, and then you're driving your user to a conversion point. Your main content that you're displaying is not something that they really need to interact with a lot and things like that. They're there to visually read information and be converted at that point. So that's why I would say it's best for landing pages, because you're maybe creating 10 landing pages for your site and you're adjusting those layouts as you go along. It's not like a blog that you're continually adding every week or so. Something to note about the Gutenberg Editor is that it is also available in WordPress. So the layout builder is for Drupal specifically, but the Gutenberg Editor you can see in both WordPress and Drupal. So if you're coming to this webinar and you don't actually have a Drupal site, this tool is absolutely for you as well. And it's going to look very similar to how you would see it in WordPress. So we're just going to play through a demo of the Gutenberg Editor. So right off the bat, I'm going to point out this looks very different than what you would normally see on a Drupal page. There are no fields. It's totally blank. The only thing that maybe will look familiar to you is this sidebar block, where you can add your title, your meta information, and things like that. That all stays the same. So I'm going to add a quick title, and then I'm going to start building my page out, like I'm building an About Us page. I'm going to choose a cover, select from my media library here, and then I'm going to start building my banner right visually on the page there. I can add various elements as I go along. So I can add my paragraph element, drop some placeholder text in there, and continue to build each element down the page. We have a great column builder that I can add that to column layout, maybe put an image on one side, and decide, do I want text to be on this side? You can pretty much put anything within each column. I can also rearrange these blocks to move up and down if I've decided I'd rather have this block appear above this block of text. It's all extremely visual. Again, just to emphasize, you're creating this page as you go along. There are no designated fields on this page. It's pretty much whatever you decide is going to appear. I can add this nice quote here. And you pretty much see exactly what you're going to get. There's not going to be a lot of differences of what you're looking at here and how it appears on your front end side. I really like their gallery feature in here, honestly. It works really well out of the box. I can choose up to as many images as I want. I can adjust the columns that it displays across the board like this, and rearrange each image. Or remove images if I decide I don't want one of them anymore. It's all very intuitive, which is nice. You're not going to any kind of documentation to figure out how do I create that gallery block, dealing with entity queues if you've had to use any of that before. It kind of removes that whole step, which is great. And then once I'm done, I can just click Save, and I'll see exactly how it looks on the front end. So I can scroll through these elements. The great thing about this is, again, the standard out of the box, but we can theme these elements to look more on brand. So if you have certain overlays, certain fonts that you guys are using, you would like different sizes, we can edit any of this content or even create your own custom blocks that you guys can use within here. I can add spacers in between, adjust any of the content that's appearing. It appears exactly as it did in the editor. I can go back to the edit page and maybe decide I don't like the spacer to appear there. Maybe I can move it right above that banner image. And save it out, and then I have that spacing that I was looking for instead of using any paragraph breaks or things like that. So you can adjust more than just the elements you're putting on the page, but all the spacing and how that feels around it. So the Gutenberg Editor features. Out of the box, you're going to get every single one of these elements. There's not anything that your developer has to do in addition. which is great. So this is a big difference from that layout builder, is you won't have this extra set of tools. This is what gives you the ability to build those landing pages with so many different elements that your developer would never even have to build for you. It just comes right out of the box with this particular module. If there are more elements that you're looking for, the Gutenberg Cloud is actually a great resource to kind of brainstorm and look at what other people are using on their sites. And I really like it because all you have to do is click one of these elements, we can add it to your Gutenberg plugin, and you'll be able to use it right away. So what we like about it, the pros is it has a wide variety of out-of-the-box element. I see this as the biggest pro because it reduces the amount of time that your developer has to be building all those custom features to your website, and it's easy for you to see exactly what you're building and on the editor side. So you don't have to do that save and look how it's appearing, things like that. The biggest con is switching between full width and contained region elements is a little bit trickier in my opinion, because we're not defining those like we would with the layout builder. So you would have to have the ability to add those columns, add those containers yourself to kind of get that diverse layout. But it's honestly not that big of a con. As an example of just how robust these features are, I had a screenshot here of the banner element here. You can choose the focal point of the image, you can choose the background position, or even the overlay colors, all with just a really intuitive tool right in your editor experience. So let's review. Traditional site building is limited. It's great, we use it all the time, but you might hit a point with your website that you're wishing that you could do more on your own, more on the fly. Instead of having to constantly work with your design team of how to update and change things, this could be something you could be doing on your own with these tools. The Gutenberg Editor and Layout Builder are extremely powerful, and they might be too much for some content editors, too many choices, things like that. We can pare it down for you. You don't have to use every single one of these elements. If you foresee that as being an issue with your site, you can pick and choose maybe just one or two of these elements and start out like that to see how it goes, especially if you're using multiple content editors. You maybe don't want to open the floodgates on this. But what I think is really nice is you don't have to pick one or the other. You can use both on your site. So if you have a product page and a landing page, you can choose the Gutenberg Editor for the landing page and the Layout Builder for the product page. And you can see how they both go and adjust layouts in those two different ways. Do we have any questions that I can answer about either of the tools at this time?
Jenna, our first question comes from Steve, and he says, do you feel like these tools make Drupal 8 more competitive with WordPress for content admins?
That is a great question. So WordPress, I always hear everyone loves it because the content editing experience is just so much easier and more intuitive, which I agree, Drupal has definitely lacked in that way. With the introduction of these tools, I think that it's keeping the content managers more in mind and giving you visual tools to arrange your pages on your own. So it absolutely makes it more competitive because with both of these tools, you pretty much are addressing every use case in your site for needing to design and apply your own layouts to any content.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Mark, and he says, what is your favorite aspect of Layout Builder and why?
My favorite aspect is I like how it moves away from needing to be on that block layout page and placing blocks that way, which can be very confusing. And it gives you a very visual experience for adding blocks to any page that you want. Often we see that our clients don't use those blocks as often for that very reason. And so this way, they now have the ability to grab that related content block, to grab that call to action that they had on a different page and drop it right on to their landing page without fear that you're going to break the rest of your site by moving this block around.
Jenna, as a follow-up to that, so I know we talk to a lot of people every day who are on Drupal 7 and they're considering Drupal 8. What would you tell them about Layout Builder to help them navigate that decision, whether it makes sense?
Yeah. Layout Builder, coming seeing from Drupal 7 in particular, where it's a very stale experience for content editors, where you're inputting fields and however it comes out is just kind of determined by maybe a very dated design that you aren't able to update. With the introduction of Layout Builder and the Gutenberg Editor, now you can constantly be re-engineering your site and making sure that you're staying current, staying fresh, because you have these tools that you can rearrange your content so easily. So I think the experience is just in leaps and bounds better in Drupal 8 than it is in Drupal 7 as a content manager.
Our next question, kind of on the flip side here, comes from Julie, and she says, what is the most common pain point you see content admins having when they use Drupal 8?
Yeah, a common pain point is we will give them, blocks, and if you're familiar with paragraphs, different things to use throughout your site, but they just don't know how to use them. They're nervous to place those blocks themselves, and they aren't able to kind of arrange them the layout that they want. They're kind of trapped in this one design, and it's not working for the content they have. So, this kind of seeks to ease that pain point, where it's giving you this very visual editor that is much more accessible to people, and it's allowing you to rearrange content in whatever way that you see best without needing to pause your day, come to that screeching halt, and message your development team looking for help, and then you're unable to complete the task that you were looking to do in that very moment.
And our next question comes from Abby, and I think you touched upon this a little bit throughout the presentation in terms of comparing Layout Builder and Gutenberg, but probably worth revisiting because we covered a lot of ground. She says, when do you feel it's best to use Layout Builder, and when should you use Gutenberg instead?
Mm-hmm. They can work in any situation that you want. What I see best is Layout Builder, to me, would work best for any piece of content that has lots and lots of fields, where you have that synced content or you need those fields in order to correctly input all the information to that node, but you still want to be able to rearrange it. So think case studies, products, even blog posts can be like this as well. Gutenberg is great for content that you're constantly newly generating, so landing pages or basic pages would be the biggest use case for that.
Thanks, John.
I have a question from Ellen. How easy is it to implement these modules to existing sites? I definitely didn't cover that, so that is a great question. They are relatively new, but it is easy to add them. I would say the Gutenberg Editor is easiest. The Layout Builder, because you're adjusting layouts with fields, can be a little bit more time-consuming, and you have to make sure that you're working with your theme. So if we're thinking of a landing page that you have already built out, it already contains a lot of styles, your developers will have to account for those changes. So how I would foresee us implementing that is we remove a lot of those hard set layout aspects, and instead we rebrand the landing pages to comprise of components that you can then place and move around easily on your site. So the module is easy to implement. There is some work that you would have to do with the development team to kind of make sure that each element is branded correctly and it has that ability to move around the page as freely.
That's a great question. Our next question comes from, April, and she says, how do you see tools like Layout Builder and Gutenberg impacting the collaboration between graphic designers and creators and front-end developers like yourself?
That's great, yeah. And I actually had this conversation with our designer earlier this week as I was working on this presentation. I see these tools shifting the way that we do the design process with a lot of our clients. So instead of giving them a very specific branded landing page, we would give you designs for components. So a banner, a gallery, a quote, related content blocks, and then it would be up to you to kind of gather each of those components and arrange them in the way that you would like it to lay out. We can also offer suggestions of this is how we foresee it to lay out, but it will be seen in a very movable manner that's offered with these tools.
Excellent. We do have a few more minutes in case there are any other questions. While we wait for that, just to let you know, if you are a developer watching this and you are interested in joining the Unleash Technologies team or participating in our internship program, which is coming up very soon, please reach out to us by emailing us at careers at unleashed-technologies.com. I see a few of you are here today on the webinar, so hopefully we get a chance to speak with you afterwards. And if you're interested in learning more about how Gutenberg and Layout Builder could be integrated into your site, or just Drupal 8 in general, please feel free to reach out to us anytime by emailing us at start@unleashed-technologies.com. Well, it looks like that is going to do it for today. So I want to thank Jenna for the hard work and presentation today. I think we all learned a lot. And we look forward to having you join us for our next webinar in October. Thanks, everybody.